All right, we're going live now, so I don't know.
Yeah, but other than that, it was pretty good.
Yeah. I think maybe I've heard Stephen do that before.
I would say it was pretty well crafted.
Yeah.
He'd worked on it a few. He'd workshopped that a few times, I'd say.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me, actually.
Yeah.
All right, man.
One
We are
thing
live.
for your Minnesota blood, yesterday, April, what was it, the 18th or whatever, snow, like
Hey, where you are?
in Elmira. No, it was so like in upstate New York, like, and I'm talking. I mean, when we were driving back on the side of the interstate, it was probably at least 6 or 8 inches, at least, if not more, that was on the ground.
Wow.
What is going on here? What is
Yeah.
going on? It's April. Wild.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been getting our fair share this April too.
It's insane to me.
April snow showers.
Yeah, I don't think and because the wild thing was when we were leaving, it was like bright sun coming through the clouds and
Mhm.
snow coming down.
Mhm.
I don't think I'll ever totally get used to that. Funny.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we got some folks here.
Let's do it.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. If anybody's made comments, I haven't seen them, but do you see any comments?
No, just that we got some joined on. So.
All right, cool. We are going to be in Hebrews chapter 12, and last time we talked, we read through chapter 12, verse 3. Good morning, Amber. And but I'm going to go ahead and start in chapter 12, verse 1, and we'll read through verse 17. Although, this is always the hard part about Hebrews, and we keep talking about how so much of what we're talking about depends on context around it, and this letter is just all connected. I'll have to wait probably to say more about this, but I really think that chapter 12, especially the second half of the chapter, is calling to mind some stuff from the book of Isaiah that I'll probably have to save that because there's a lot to say. But putting this chapter back in the context of what we've been looking at in Hebrews, back in chapter 10, there was a transition in the letter when he said, all right, therefore, since we have this Christ and we have these promises and we have this ability to approach God, let us draw near to God. Let us be the people that we need to be. And one of the main things he's been saying since chapter 10 is that we are people who need endurance.
Mm-hmm.
That every one of us can start well. Every one of us can kind of have a moment where we're like, we're going to do this. But it's the day in and day out of serving God and making sacrifice and living by faith that gets difficult. And chapter 11 highlighted all these people that lived by faith and how the world wasn't worthy of them because they knew that their world was a different world, that they were headed for something else. And I think we're still kind of talking about that.
Yeah.
He's going to talk about here how we can endure by seeing Jesus, and then how we have to endure through God's discipline and kind of all of that. So we're still in this conversation about that.
Yep. Which is why this chapter has some pretty heavy duty, hard stuff.
Yeah, it
But
does.
kind of the whole point. Life is heavy duty and hard, and we gotta get tough and endure sometimes, which only comes by the grace of God and walking by faith. But it is not going to be easy. It's going to be really challenging, and that's kind of the point of this chapter in some ways.
Yeah, very good. I want to comment on that maybe as we get into this. Hebrews has been all about contrasting Jesus with the old law. But one thing we haven't really seen in this is what is almost common Christian vernacular these days is, one of the things that makes Jesus better than the old law is he's just so much easier than the old law.
Mm-hmm.
That was never the argument in the New Testament is, hey, God's kind of dumbed it down for you. And now that you have Christ, life's a piece of cake.
Right.
Essentially what the New Testament's going to say is, yeah, we can find rest for our souls when we're weary and heavy laden in Christ. But the standards of Christ and coming to him to bear our burdens, there's nothing easy about it. Like the discipline of being a disciple of Christ is so challenging that even in the first century, it pushed people back to a system that was oppressive, because the shame that comes with being a Christian, the sacrifice that comes with being a Christian is not easy. And I think we make a mistake if we come to the New Testament thinking, oh, phew, this is going to be such a cakewalk. If that's the case, we probably don't have our idea of grace or Christ right.
Yep. But it's better. All the things about Jesus are better. That's been the argument in the book of Hebrews. But not a bit of it has meant it was easier for God, or necessarily easier, at least in our kind of way of thinking of things, in our kind of entertainment and comfort laden mentality that we a lot of times have. It's not easier, but it's better. And that's kind of the argument here is, hey, I know it's really hard, but this is still better. So hang in there, do the stuff you need to do, and keep pushing through.
Yeah, good. And we'll talk about why. I mean, there's some nuance in that. And we'll talk about why, but let's go ahead and read. I'll start in chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Furthermore, we have had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. Shall we not much rather be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share his holiness. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterward it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Therefore, strengthen the hands that are weak and the knees that are feeble, and make straight paths for your feet, so that the limb which is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Pursue peace with all men, and the sanctification without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled. That there be no immoral or godless person like Esau, who sold his own birthright for a single meal. For you know that even afterwards, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought for it with tears.
I think if you just read verses 4 through 17 in this section, it would be so burdensome. I mean, he literally starts off with, yeah, I mean, it's been hard, but at least you haven't shed blood. It's like, dude, is that our standard? That's pretty tough. That's a pretty high bar that we're talking here. And so much of verses 4 through 17 is pretty arduous. There's a lot of beautiful stuff in here too, but when you look at the life path that it lays out, is really tough. On the other hand, if you just read verses 1 through 3, it might kind of sound like Christianity's not even that big of a deal. Jesus has done all this stuff for you. You just kind of pay attention to him and that's it. But I love, and I think there's a temptation for all Christians to do one or the other, to just think about, oh, Jesus did it all, which he has in one sense. But then therefore it should be easy for me because look at all the stuff he's done. And then you kind of feel cheated whenever you out there try to follow Jesus and it's not as easy as you think. On the flip side, you can just kind of pay attention to the verse 4 through 17 kind of ideas and forget to do what he says in verses 1 through 3, and you're never going to make it because you're just not. You're trying to go at it with your own wisdom or your own power or your own whatever. because I said that verses 1 through 8 is so critical for the stuff we're going to talk about in verses 4 through 17. After chapter 11, where he talks about all these people of faith, he says, hey, really all those people were witnesses to the fact that faith works. And actually, Jesus is the best witness to that. And we fix our eyes on him. He's the one who pioneered the path of faith. He's the one who perfects faith for us. You got to keep your eyes focused on him. You got to, verse 3, consider him. Like he said at the very beginning of the book in chapter 3, you got to keep it locked on Jesus and everything, and throw off everything else that might take your eyes off of Jesus or slow you down from walking closely to Jesus. You got to stay locked on to him. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to make it whenever you get into all the difficulties of what it means to have faith in God and to endure through this life. So I really find like the way these parts fit together are really important, and I think can be easy temptations for a lot of Christians to only concentrate on one side of this or the other and not see the two really working in harmony.
Yeah, that's a great point. Very good. This first part in chapter 12 follows the same structure that he's often used in the book, where it's like, therefore, let us. So verse 1,
Yeah.
therefore, since we have, let us also. What kind of strikes me about this is, I think my first tendency would be to say to some people, hey, first thing you need to do, look at Jesus. First thing you need to do, look at Jesus.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say that. What he says specifically in verse 1 is, first thing you need to do is lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which easily entangles us, and run with endurance, fixing your eyes on Jesus. Now, granted, I don't know that he is putting into that sequence saying that fixing our eyes on Jesus is an afterthought. But here's the idea. You can look at Jesus all you want. We can look at Jesus all we want.
Yep.
And marvel at what he went through on the cross. But if his call to us is take up your cross and follow me,
right,
that is going to be a difficult thing to deal with. How do we deal with the cross that I have to carry? How do I deal with the shame of being associated with this one? And fixing our eyes on Jesus only matters if we're running a race and we're running toward him.
Yep.
And this idea, this would be a perfect time for people in the New Testament to say things like, hey, here's the reality of the new covenant. You don't have to worry about your sin or your encumbrance. It can't possibly entangle you anymore because Jesus forgives you and his grace is in your life. But there's a reality to sin that even if God forgives it, to carry it around with us will absolutely still trip us up. There's the idea, and maybe this is something we don't talk enough about, I don't talk enough about, the idea of sort of being saved is not just escaping the guilt of sin. It's escaping the consequence and the entanglement and the decay and corruption of it.
Yeah.
And here, what's that?
The slavery of it.
The slavery of it. Yeah, the bondage of it. And so this call to make sure that sin's being put away and we're able to run freely is part of the call. It is the call. And that's why endurance is difficult. Is a Christian who understands what the call of Christ is, understands that they're, like we get to verse 4, we're striving against sin. We are striving against sin. And all of this kind of goes together to help us. But I'm just pointing out, it isn't just as easy as saying, look at Jesus. Yep. It's look at Jesus while you are disciplining yourself and running through this race and letting God make you better.
Well, and that's really the only reason you would have for fixing your eyes on Jesus anyways, or at least pretty soon you'd figure out that's the only reason you'd have for fixing your eyes on Jesus. That's his point in verse 3, for consider him. Well, what are we considering about him? Consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself so that you won't grow weary and give up. If you're not doing anything that you could get weary over, if you're not doing anything that you might be tempted to give up on, why are you even bothering looking at Jesus? Why are you even bothering thinking about Jesus? Anytime you look at and think about Jesus and let him be the epicenter of your life and your heart and your soul, it's going to drive you to see, I can't be me anymore. mean, you referenced how this is a parallel passage in many ways to where Jesus says you got to take up your cross and follow me. Where he starts with that is deny yourself,
Right.
take up your cross, follow me. And that's kind of the point here. You got to dump off yourself, all the weights and encumbrances that so easily entangle us. Ourself is the very first one, and the sin that we've brought into our lives and into the world and all that sort of thing. If you're not fighting, why do you need this this source of strength? Why do you need this model for how to fight? And it is. I mean, he's going to come down later and talk about lifting up feeble hands. It's like, it sounds like a Rocky movie or whatever. I mean, you know, like that's kind of the vibe that he's giving off here. But if you're not in the ring trying to fight, there's no, what's the point anyways? Why are you even talking about this? So yeah, I think that's so right and so good. But it also, I think this passage here at the beginning also points out, hey, in your fight, don't forget, number one, you're not the first person to have fought. You're not the first person to run this race. And you're there, and there is someone has run it and ran it faithfully and did it. That was the point back in chapter 3, that Jesus was faithful. The call being, you should also be faithful as a Christian. And here he comes right back to that. But not only is it, you're not the first person who's ever fought it, and here's a model for how you're going to fight your battle in this world against sin and against death and against evil and all that. But there's also this, hey, it came out good for him. There was joy that was set before him, and he endured. He ran the race, and he sat down at the right hand of God. You can too. So don't give up. Even when it's difficult, keep on going, because there's something on the other side of that if you're willing to endure.
Yeah, very good. And isn't that statement that the way he endured was because of the joy set before him?
Right.
Isn't that the same thing we learned in chapter 11? The way that all those faithful endured
Yep.
was the joy set before them. They all confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims. They all were understanding that their current circumstance was difficult, but there was a joy set before them that they meditated on. It fueled them. It was their identity. And here Jesus is tied back to them. So
yeah, 100%.
So verse 4, as he gets to this part about, verse 4 has always kind of been an interesting statement to me. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood, and you're striving against sin. Like, if I could put that in my own words, it sounds like he's saying, like, hey, you're not dead yet.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know I know life's been tough, and I know sin is a struggle, and I know that there's a lot of things that we all want to feel sorry for ourselves about, but you aren't dead yet. Like, you have not taken this battle to the place of, really fighting against it until it takes your life from you.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a little bit of so rub some dirt on it, get up, like, why are you whining and complaining? He's not coddling us here, though,
Sure.
And that's tough when you think about who he's talking to, because if you go back to chapter 10, he's talking to these people that left their families and they had their property seized from them and they lost their freedoms. And those were the people that he said, he didn't pat them on the head and say, I'm sorry, this is so tough. He said, you have need of endurance.
Yeah.
You're not dead yet. Pick yourself up. And don't forget something. Like, you've forgotten, verse 5, some things. Anyway, I'll let you comment on that first.
Well, it sets a whole new standard for when to give up. I don't know a better way to say that, because I think, and I know for me, and I think I know from a lot of conversations over the years, man, like, it's so hard. I keep getting tempted, so I had to give in this time. Or the temptation is so hard, or it seems so unfair, or I've dealt with this for so long. I mean, whatever the case may be, we have all these kind of standards where, like, okay, if this condition exists, then I'm allowed to give up. Yeah. He basically says there's no giving up until shedding blood. And I don't think that means like there's a trickle. I think he means like you're dead. That's the point when you're done with your struggle. And so you really can't ever say, to your point, there's no coddling at all. It's really recalibrating our perspective on when the struggle is over. And I guess, just as a side note, sometimes and I guess I should say and I know friends and people I know who we can abuse that word struggle, like, I'm struggling. Be like, well, what do you mean by struggling? Like, do I mean I've been giving up a lot? Because that's not struggling, that's giving up.
Right.
Struggling is I'm really fighting, I'm wrestling, I'm going for it. I got to keep
Right.
on going. And that's the appeal of the section is until you're dead, the struggle isn't over. So don't think you can give in or give up
Hmm.
because you've dealt with it so long, or nobody else understands this, or nobody else has dealt with this, or whatever the thing may be, which by the way, he's already dealt with all that stuff in the way he's
Yeah.
talked about Jesus. So much of this letter, this book has been about Jesus dealing with our sin and
Hmm.
enabling us to deal with our sin. And here he's kind of just come to it of like, all right, whatever reason you may have had up until now, I hope you can see you really have no excuse to give up in the struggle against sin until you're
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah. Very good. Ed Sanderson's version of this is "Suck it up, Buttercup." So
Yeah, right.
if he was to do a translation, I guess. Um, no, I was thinking about what you just said about the way we talk sometimes. Like, oh man, I'm really struggling. I have a friend that has had, as he puts it, an unhealthy relationship with alcohol in his life. And so he's gone to AA meetings and stuff like that. And he told me one time that in these meetings, sometimes if you all show up and everybody's talking about their stories, and somebody says, well, man, I've really been trying lately. Their phrase is trying is lying.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? You're either doing it or you're not doing it. You're either like, you know, abstaining or you're not abstaining. That's kind of the idea.
Like Master
Or,
Yoda said,
yeah,
do it.
Yoda.
There is no try.
That's right. Do or do not. There is no try. And I get what we're saying because he even says so. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood, and you're striving against sin. Like he's saying you are striving, but if you give up in this, then you've given up too early.
Right.
I was thinking about too just the way that this is sort of framed. How many people in their life, instead of thinking about getting sin out of their life to the point of actually dying in their fight against it, do we almost flip that around? And people almost think something like this. A lot of us, I think, man, if I can't have this thing in my life, this person in my life, this way of life, if I can't have what I want in this life, then I might as well be dead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why not? And there are people that literally, because life, they don't get from life what they hoped or what they envisioned or what they wished. They end up literally taking their own life. This
Mhm.
kind of flips the paradigm a little bit and says, look, your life's not really here anyway. Your life is somewhere else.
Yeah.
And your purpose here is to strive against these deceptive things you think give you life.
Mhm.
You know, even if it's your family in Jerusalem that misses you and wants you to come back to the family religion, and it's much more comfortable if you do that. And man, I can't live the rest of my life out here in these caves. I can't live the rest of my life being alone. I can't live the rest of my life. Can I? Can I do that? And I just, the point I'm making is we often get upside down on this. Like,
Yeah.
oh, without this particular thing in my life, I might as well be dead. And the author here says, no, think about it the other way. Like, fight against this stuff until you're dead. Like,
But then I think he does kind of a surprising thing because so much of the language up till is now like it's pretty I don't know a better word, lonely or isolated. Like
mhm,
running the race, I just picture the person in the marathon who has reached like mile 22 or whatever, and there's kind of nobody else around and they're really
yeah,
tired and they want to give up. Or the person who's out there on the battlefront and they're fighting and there's nobody really around them, or the people that are around them are dropping like flies left and right and they just feel really, really alone and vulnerable and all that kind of stuff. But then he comes in verse 5 and following and he says, but hey, actually, not only are you fixing your eyes on Jesus, but all this stuff that you're going through is not really just you going through it on your own. Have you forgotten that all this
mhm,
hard stuff and all the challenging things that go with living a godly, righteous, faithful life in the world, like Jesus and following after Jesus, is the life that the Father is watching over, and the Father is using and utilizing all these things and even putting you through some of these things for your good, like a good father would. And whether you
mhm,
had a good father or not, you know what a good father would be like. Even if you had a bad father or no father at all, that even makes you, in some ways, heightens your understanding of the ideal father. And God is a good father. He's the good father. And all this tough stuff It's not you out here on your own trying to make your own way. It's a father who's guiding you and watching you and caring for you, and yes, disciplining you. And it's very painful. None of it is joyful in the moment. It's not that Jesus had joy in the moment of the cross. It was the joy set before him. And we look forward to the joy that will come at the end of our Father caring for us. And I love how he does that, because it's pretty isolating and vulnerable and frightening whenever you read verses 1 through 4, I guess. But then he really hits this notion of, hey, but actually all this stuff that's happening, it's your Father's good pleasure to do good for you and to do good in you and to use all these bad things to bring about joy in the end.
Yeah, very good. Which kind of I want to comment now based on that, on what he says in verse 5 and 6. The problem, he says, with people that lack endurance is that we've forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to us as sons. And then he quotes Proverbs 3:11, which I'll just go ahead and say, I didn't even know that was addressed to us as sons. Like when I go read Proverbs, my first thought is, oh, Solomon was talking to his kids, and this is a book for kids where like the king was trying to teach his boys who might grow up to be kings, like that they should probably live life a better way. And here the Hebrew writer says, no, you've forgotten that all that wisdom that was written was addressed to you as sons. The son in the book of Proverbs is not simply Solomon's kids.
Yeah.
The son in the book of Proverbs is every one of us who belong to Jesus Christ. And the wisdom that's being taught there is addressed to us as sons. But what specifically did we forget about this quote in verses 5 and 6? There are two wrong reactions to discipline. The first one is that we regard it lightly. And the second one is that we faint from it. Now that you're raising kids, Ben, I don't know what your kids are like, but parents that raise children and try to discipline them can have those two reactions. Like you can have one kid that you discipline them and you're trying to help them understand they can't do this and they need to do it better. And you even use corporal discipline and do whatever you need to do. And they shrug it off. They regard it lightly. They're like, meh.
They don't take it seriously.
They don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
And then there's the other kid who you even start to move toward them to discipline them, and they lose their blooming mind that like, oh, my life is over. I can't believe I got in trouble. And here's what scripture says. Don't do either of those things. Stop it.
Yeah.
Don't regard it lightly and don't faint. Understand that discipline has a purpose.
Yeah.
And accept the discipline for what it is and let God make you better from it.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at, like, I've used this kind of comment. God loves humanity, and God's going to want humanity to get better. Like, I think God still is involved with the rising and falling of nations and world things and all of that. I don't think it's anybody, like, I think any of us that have any spiritual mind about us at all realize that God's been trying to teach humanity some things these last few years, that an invisible bug can bring us to our knees and like mess up, economies and all that kind of stuff. But if you notice that there's two reactions to stuff like that in the world, there is the people that shrug it off and say, whatever, it doesn't matter, it's no big deal. And then there's the people that are like, this is the end of the world, everything's falling apart.
Right.
And then there's the people that are like, wait, okay, I remember God said something about this. I'm supposed to learn something. I'm supposed to take what God does or allows to be done, and as difficult as it might be, I need for me to learn how to share his holiness, to be trained by it, to find peace. Like, there is a purpose in this discipline, and I can't forget the exhortation to not overreact in one way or the other.
Yep. And the base, I know we're pretty much out of time, and we'll come back to this and I guess pick up in verse 7 or 8, 10, wherever. But the only way you're going to be able to take God's discipline seriously and not lose heart over it is if you really believe verse 6. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves. I mean, you said it, that is the key, which is why fixing our eyes on Jesus is so crucial.
Right.
Because fixing our eyes on Jesus, both in the relationship that he had with the Father that shows the Father's love to him, but also the love that the Father shows to the world and to us, especially who are in Christ through Jesus. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son so that, Hebrews chapter 2, he might bring many sons to glory. That was what it was all about. And if we really believe that, if we really see all the great things that the book of Hebrews has told us about Jesus, the sacrifice he is, his priesthood is, the way he shares in our humanity, all that stuff, it makes us believe, if we'll allow ourselves to, it makes us believe in the love of God. And then when we go out there trying to live faithfully to God, we know even the worst, darkest, hardest, most challenging things, it's not because God doesn't love us. It's because of how much he does love us and how he's trying to give us the strength to endure so that we can come out on the other side and not keep being children that are all messed up, but that will be sons of glory. Like he said.
Isn't this what David sang about in Psalm 23? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you're with me. And then he says this weird, your rod and your staff comfort me.
Yes.
I thought a rod and a staff not only could fight off enemies, but could discipline the sheep, like, but there's a comfort in knowing that God is not only fighting for us and keeping enemies away, he's fighting, striving with us for us to remove the sin from our life.
Yeah.
And there's a comfort in that, knowing that God loves me that way. So
absolutely.
Great point. All right. We'll pick up right there. Thanks for everybody for joining us. Time flies.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. We look forward to next time.
All right. See you.